The Nigerian Senate has approved the $6.1 billion loan request by President Muhammadu Buhari. The loan request, which is equivalent to about 2.4 trillion naira, was approved on Wednesday after the Senate considered the report of the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debts. Joining us to discuss debts and a number of other pressing issues in Nigeria is Mr. Bismark Rewane, Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited and member of President Buhari's Economic Advisory Council. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Starting with the debt, what do you make of this approval and I guess Nigeria's debt profile and the talking points around that?
Firstly, the total debt itself is not a problem, but the debt service as a percentage of revenue is already reached about 94%. And if you take debt service, you take overheads and you take salaries, it comes to about almost 140%. So we have an expense management problem in the country, one, of which debt services. But it's also interesting to know that the debt service we have now, when interest rates have been kept artificially low, is also depressed. When we now get to a market interest rate determined situation, your debt service is going to increase. And the true issue is that what have you used this debt to do? This is debt to finance the budget, and it's already approved. It's not additional debt as such. But by the time you draw it down, it becomes additional debt. And we have to be mindful of the fact that we are probably borrowing to a large extent to meet consumption and recurrent expenditure. But what's the alternative? Right? So the situation is, it's not, I wouldn't say it's precarious, but it is something that needs to be managed. And the debt management office seems to be on top of it, but it's something that Nigerians should know that there's a revenue problem. There's a nominal debt issue is not a problem, but the debt service, when interest rates begin to increase, may become a burden, not only to this generation, but to the next generation.
Thank you so much for that. I want to ask you about subsidies. Even in our last segment, it was discussed. The Minister of State for Budget was saying that subsidies are, essentially just for the wealthier Nigerians. What's your take on what's been going on?
Well, the truth is that subsidies are reverse taxes. And reverse taxes means that you are actually subsidizing consumption rather than subsidizing production. Subsidies themselves are not necessarily evil. So many economists in Europe, you subsidize wool, people that produce wool, people that produce wheat, the farmers who produce, so that at least the subsidies are used to keep them producing, because GDP is the output measure. So, but if you are subsidizing consumption of wool, now what has happened is that it distorts the canons of taxation. Say that taxes must be administratively easy to collect, must generate revenue, must be neutral, and must be fair and equitable. Those are the four canons of taxation as espoused by Adam Smith way back. Now, this reverse tax, only benefits the people that drive cars. The trucks that carry food, the trucks that carry passengers, all are priced in diesel. Diesel has been deregulated ages ago.
Yes.
Today, diesel is going for 295, 300 naira a liter, whilst petrol is going for 165 naira here. Now, in other markets, it is the diesel is almost half the price of petrol. But here we have petrol being half the price of diesel, right?
Yes.
Now, we've seen the price of the consumption of petrol in Nigeria increase at 15 times faster than the rate of growth of the GDP. Petrol consumption is cyclical. If the economy is growing, then the petrol consumption increases. So how can the economy be growing at 0.5% whilst the consumption of petrol grows at 16% average in 5 years? So we've gone from 30 million liters a day when the economy was growing at 5, 6, 8% to now 103 million liters a day. Obviously, it is quite obvious that all of that is being smuggled. Not only that, some of it is being recycled. The petrol is going out of the country and coming back in. So even if you put the entire army, the entire navy, and everybody, you will not be able to police it. The only way to do it is to allow the price reflective. The other thing about subsidies is that there's this argument that if you remove subsidies, it will feed into inflation, and there's data to show that in Ghana, the rate of inflation is 7.5%, while the price of petrol is $1.14 per liter. Using I&E rate, that's about 420 per liter. In Benin, Togo, where inflation rates are even though subsidized by the French, inflation rates are 1.5%, and their petrol price is 98 cents per liter. Cameroon, the same thing. So what are we doing? We're just bringing in, this is a smuggler's paradise. So that's what we're having, and it's not benefiting anybody. Now we are spending $6 billion on subsidies, which you cannot see the benefit. And quite frankly, kerosene has been what the poor people cook with, been deregulated. Diesel has been deregulated. So there's nothing wrong in deregulating petrol. How you go about it, whether you do it in one fell swoop or you stages, and then, but the money saved from petrol subsidy should be applied for things that can benefit the people. Rather than, last time we did it in 2012, we took the money and put it in a Shopee account. Shopee was a bridge to nowhere. So the money came away from consumers and sat in a bank account of the government. So what happened? GDP slumped. Therefore, what some of us are espousing is that we must use it almost simultaneously. Scholarships, healthcare, things that the people. So if you say, look, we remove the subsidy, but everybody who is earning below so will get a scholarship to Nigerian University and that this $6 billion is used every year towards this. I'd rather pay higher petrol, and I know that my children can go to school and hospital and all that for almost free. That makes a lot of sense.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that, sir. I want to also move to inflation. I think I believe a presentation to Lagos Business School, like the report you put out, you are projecting that inflation could actually go back to 18% for June. Yes.
Yes. Inflation is a sensitive issue here. Sorry, and the reality is that the headline inflation is about the price of a basket of goods last year compared to the price of a basket of goods this year. We carry out a narrow projection for Lagos Metropolis. We use that to actually project what it will be nationally. We think when we constructed our basket, we saw that between 2019 and 2020, our basket went up by 14.5%, which is close enough to what. But then the same basket between 2020 and 2021 has gone up by 33.5%.
Wow.
Okay. So let's say it's narrow, right? But it tells you something. There's base year. But at this time last year, what we think is probably happening is that at this time last year, because of restricted movement, the enumerators were calling people a lot of misinformation because the markets were closed. You know that. The markets, there was partial reopening in July. So the figures for April, May, and June will probably reflect part of the abnormal situation, the base year abnormal situation. Therefore, when you are comparing this year, which is a normal situation, with a base year that was abnormal, there may be some disparities. But we still believe, and I've gone around, apart from rice, which is flatlining, tomatoes, pepper, flour, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was 100 naira, it's 150 naira now. So it's quite clear that those goods, flour, 8,500 to 11,000 today. It's now 16,500 going to 17,000.
Wow.
Right? So what happens? You still buy the loaf of bread for 350 naira, but that loaf of bread will be so light that you need 2 loaves. So basically, you can't. Then there was somebody on BBC this morning said a tray of eggs, 30 eggs. One egg is now 66 naira. What was it 2 years ago?
Much less.
Oh, yeah. One egg, 66 naira?
Yeah.
No, let's take oranges.
Yes.
Please, just ask for a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice and see how much it's priced anywhere today. 2,000. So, this is the anecdotal evidence shows that people are hurting in terms of prices. So, we think that that is it, but you know.
So tough situation. So what about the impact on firms, firms doing business in Nigeria?
What has happened is that inflation does two things. It reduces your income, but it also makes you switch to other substitutes. So, for example, if you are eating cheese, you probably go to butter. You're eating crackers, you go to something else. Only inelastic products like salt, salt in particular, is where you cannot really, whether the price goes down or not higher, you cannot increase the quantity of salt you demand anyway. Right. So that is happening to people. So firms that are producing inelastic products are able to some extent, push the price increase to their customers, right? But before I go into the firms, I want to explain something else. Money supply between this year alone has increased by 20%, while GDP output has increased by 0.5%. So if the goods you are producing increased by 0.5%, while the money in circulation increased by 20%, that's your 19.5% inflation out there, without addressing the exchange rate kick in. The exchange rate kicked in 24th of May, then the impact of that you feel in June. Now, what are the companies doing? The companies are becoming much more cost efficient. Some of them are passing part of that cost efficiency in by absorbing some of the price, while others are doing other things. And that takes me to a company like Flour Mills of Nigeria.
Flour Mills, yes.
Very interesting company. In spite of the fact that they had a one-off translation loss of about 12.5 billion naira, their income grew astronomically. And what are they doing at the same time? They are integrating backwards, right? They are in the feed milling business, which is because there's a correlation between the GDP of a country and the consumption of protein.
Yes.
So when you see the GDP growing, or when it starts to grow, you will see an increase in the consumption of chickens, beef, and all of these things. So what have they done? They've gone into the feed milling business and pelletize the feed. They've gone also into anchor borrowers to giving farmers in Nigeria wheat growing and some other cereals and all, Kano and all these other places. So they're actually not just growing, but they're also getting inclusive growth in their revenues. And also, they are at the forefront of the rehabilitating some of the irrigation dams. So when you put all of these things together, you get the impact of a company whose income is growing, paying taxes, but integrating backwards to ensuring that their goals and those of policymakers are aligned. I think that's very important. And it will be interesting to see, we've seen that happen also with companies like Dangote Cement and some others. Nestle has been able to extract some cost savings and pushing it on. But it also makes one thing clear, that as we go into the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, you have to be cost efficient and competitive. If not, people will smuggle into the country. But if you are producing here and you can get things across the borders officially, it can increase Nigerian exports. And also, because of the programs of self-sufficiency, then we begin to say that what I expect in the next 2 quarters for people like Flour Mills of Nigeria, if the central bank increases, and I think they will, increase the level of forex disbursed into the market, and exchange rate begins to appreciate again as they converge, then we will see spike in sales and a lot of benefits.
Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited and member of President Buhari's Economic Advisory Council, Mr. Bismark Rewane, thank you so much for talking to us about the burning issues in Nigeria. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.